Hello, Kinder friends. Today we are on lesson 7 in our president unit. We are going to be hearing about a president named Theodore Roosevelt. You're going to listen carefully and hear about Roosevelt's early life and how that affected his life as president and why he is considered an important president. So go ahead and enjoy, relax, listen so that you are able to answer questions when we are done with the read aloud. Here we go. Today we know him as Theodore or Teddy Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States. But when he was young, his mother called him Theodore when she introduced him to her friends. His friends called him TR, and his father called him TD, especially when he wanted his son to remember something important. TD, he might say, there is nothing more important than a good education. And Teddy would listen. Teddy Roosevelt always listened to what his father said. When he was 6 years old, Teddy, his younger brother, and a friend were visiting their grandparents in New York City. But one day the children did not play as they usually did. On this day, they stood by a window with Teddy's father and watched as a train rolled slowly by. Mr. Roosevelt told the children, "Inside that train is Abraham Lincoln, the President of the United States." President Lincoln had died, and the train was taking him back to his home state for his funeral. "A lot of people loved Abraham Lincoln," Mr. Roosevelt continued, "and thought he was a very good man. People were sorry that President Lincoln died. They gathered along the train tracks to show how much they would miss him." Teddy thought about this for a minute and then asked his father, "Do you think President Lincoln was a good man, Father?" Teddy greatly admired his father, so he wanted to know how he felt about the president. Mr. Roosevelt replied, "I think Abraham Lincoln was a great man and a great president," he continued. "A great president can help a lot of people and do a lot of good things. Abraham Lincoln came from a poor family, but he worked hard. He was smart and kind. So many people thought highly of him that he was elected president." Mr. Roosevelt told Teddy that Abraham Lincoln was a perfect example of why he should not judge someone by the kind of clothes they wore or whether they lived in a fancy part of town. He said, "Judge them instead by what they do and why." Teddy Roosevelt had asthma, a medical condition that made it hard for him to breathe. Because of his illness, he rarely got out when he was young to meet different kinds of people in different parts of town. His father told his son that he shouldn't let his health issue keep him from living an active life. He said, "Build up your body and don't be afraid to push it too hard." Once again, Teddy listened to his father. He worked very hard to build up his body. He spent more time outdoors, climbing mountains, hiking for miles, and fishing and hunting. Teddy built up his mind too. He loved the outdoors and became an expert in the subjects of wild animals, birds, and fish. When he was 17, Teddy went to college and received the fine education his father had talked about. Throughout his life, he made sure to give his mind as much exercise as he gave his body. Teddy wrote more than 20 books and many newspaper and magazine articles. Teddy remembered the things his father taught him. He never forgot what his father had taught him that day when President Lincoln went by. 2 months later, after he finished college on his 22nd birthday, Teddy married a young woman named Alice Lee, and they had a little girl. They named her Alice too. Teddy's wife Alice died when little Alice was still a baby. But a few years later, Teddy got married again to a friend named Edith Caro. As a young man with a family, Teddy had to decide what to do with his life. He told himself, "My father was right. I must use every day I have in this world to do important things." Teddy decided to work in government so he could help people. He did not know it then, but he himself would one day become President of the United States. Teddy and his new wife Edith had 5 children together, giving Teddy's daughter Alice some sisters and brothers. Teddy often led the children outdoors to explore the woods or play on the lawn. He taught them about birds, animals, and plants and played lively games with them. Once, when another woman was visiting his wife, they heard laughter outside. Looking out the window, they saw Teddy and the children playing dress-up and running across the lawn. Edith Roosevelt smiled and told her friend, "I have no trouble controlling the children, but controlling Theodore is impossible." In those days in New York, making sure that the government was doing a good job was a tough business. Because so many dishonest people worked in government, Teddy's friends told him that nice people like him did not get involved. Teddy said, "Things will get better only when good people make them so." To start, he became the head of the New York City Police Department. He toured the streets to make sure police officers were doing their jobs fairly and honestly. A few years later, the President of the United States, William McKinley, made Teddy Roosevelt the Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Navy. Teddy felt the United States needed a strong Navy to show the world that it was a powerful country. Later, Teddy left his job with the Navy and went west. He went to lead cowboys and other people from the West. They joined the army together, and other soldiers began calling them the Rough Riders. Teddy led his Rough Riders in battle and was so brave that when he returned home, people called him a hero. They elected him governor of the state of New York. As governor, he helped make many new laws to help everyone, rich and poor, old and young, male and female. Later, Teddy Roosevelt became Vice President of the United States. 6 months after he became Vice President, President McKinley died. At age 42, Theodore Roosevelt became the 26th President of the United States. He is the youngest man to ever serve as President. As President, Roosevelt set out to help working people and poor people who had to pay too much for things they bought. President Roosevelt also tried to be a peacemaker. People said, "Teddy wants America to be strong enough to win wars, but he thinks peaceful talking is better." As he put it himself, "Speak softly, but carry a big stick." Busy as he was, President Roosevelt still found time for the outdoor activities he loved as a child. He once said, "All Americans deserve clean air, clean water, and beautiful outdoor spaces to explore. We should set aside special places now while they are still natural and wild, so our children and grandchildren may know the joy of the outdoors." President Roosevelt believed one of the most important things a president could do was to keep making the country a better place. He asked, "What will happen if one day our forests are gone?" Under President Roosevelt's direction, the government created huge parks and protected forests, lakes, and rivers to keep them clean and natural. He set up special parts of the government to protect America's lakes and rivers and to guard the wild creatures. This effort was called conserving or saving nature. Today, we still enjoy the parks and wild places President Roosevelt saved. Teddy Roosevelt helped in another way too. Once, while he and some friends were out hunting, President Roosevelt showed compassion by refusing to kill a black bear. When people heard this story, they wrote about it in the newspapers. Some people in New York City who sold toys began selling stuffed toy bears. They called them teddy bears in honor of President Roosevelt. So Teddy Roosevelt conserved nature for us to enjoy the outdoors. And he left us with teddy bears to hug indoors. No wonder we say, "There was a great president."